After a night of missing several phone calls from his daughter, one concerned father, with the aid of a sympathetic detective, engages in a quest to search for her. Could the dad be prepared for the worst? Hello, and welcome to our channel. Today we'll recap and review the mystery thriller, Searching. Let's check it out.
David, the proud father to his daughter Margot and loving husband to his wife Pam, are as any other family would be in the late 2000s, exploring the intricacies of the early internet. As a family of three, their joint togetherness of piano lessons, cooking, jogging, and all things family are disrupted by tragedy when Pam receives her lymphoma diagnosis. Even though she goes into remission long enough to see her daughter reach middle school, she eventually succumbs and leaves her loved ones behind in 2015. After all this time, her untimely death still gets captured on their antique Windows XP, the computer itself being the only lasting legacy Pam has left behind. Margot is devastated, to say the least, but the damage is hardly done. 2 years after her passing, David is forced to inherit Pam's nagging when he sees a bin full of trash, feeling the need to scold his daughter through text and video. He also praises her for at least doing well with her finals, telling her he's still proud no matter what, and Pam would be too. Yet, that one line of his wife being proud of their daughter, he doesn't send, even though it's something she'd likely want to hear, so he proceeds with the day like it's any other.
By the time David has gone to sleep, however, his computer on idle receives 3 calls from Margot in the dead of night, telling us that something is clearly wrong.
The next morning, he FaceTimes his brother Peter, who's preparing a dish Pam used to make. While asking for the recipe, he takes notice of his daughter not responding to his texts after thinking she went to school earlier than usual. Margot usually texts him when she's at school, so this morning is different. Something is definitely off. Remembering that he paid for Margot's piano lessons with a weekly $100 budget, he opts to reach out to her piano instructor for contact. It turns out, Margot hasn't been taking piano lessons for the past 6 months. This never even occurred to David at all. To even think that his daughter has been lying to him all this time. Increasingly worried, while still expecting a response from his daughter, he takes notice of a certain detail he overlooked when he took a photo of the loaded trash bin he sent to Margot. Her laptop is in the shot, meaning she hasn't been home since the Friday night she disappeared. Peter asks if David knows anyone that Margot knows. Booting up their old Windows XP for clues, he rummages through his wife's middle school files, as she used to be a teacher prior to her passing. He finds the number of one of Margot's best friends, immediately dialing it up. David is met by the mother of her best friend, who tells him that Margot got invited for a hiking trip without his permission, though she can't contact either her son nor David's daughter due to poor reception.
Of course, he's angry, but he needs to find her first to let her know.
David encounters a severe lack of clues regarding Margot's whereabouts, further frustrating him even more. Eventually, he decides to contact the National Missing and Unidentified Persons Organization, wherein he is attended to by Detective Vic. Regarding her disappearance, the agent claims to have been assigned to the case and is on the lookout for her. Once Margot's best friend returns the call to David, he says she was never with him on the hike at all. Using her laptop, David tries to log into Margot's social media accounts, and through Pam's email being set as the recovery email for her Facebook, he gains access in order to contact any mutual friends that last spotted her. One of them claims that Margot studied with her, another claimed to be in a Justin Bieber concert. All in all, their alibis have been solid so far, except one, a guy who's been snooping around her Instagram with sexually suggestive comments. But even he had his own alibi the night of her disappearance, confirming to have attended the Bieber concert as well. At a dead end, he's forced to relegate the search to Vic after hours upon hours of compiling responses from anyone who's known Margot. They themselves aren't that close to her given their indifference about her being missing. The friend she had a study group with clued David into accessing her Tumblr account, where he finds dozens of photos she's taken he has no idea of. While he's scrolling down, Vic sends him an email in regards to traffic footage found of Margot driving out of town. With how his own daughter's behavior has become unrecognizable as of late, David can't help but be confused, worried, and in denial all at the same time. Many details have been uncovered, but still none are enough to determine where Margot is. New information has come to light while David discusses the situation with Peter. It turns out that by looking through transactions on her Venmo, an online wallet account, all the piano lessons money she's been receiving the past 6 months have been deposited into her checking account and have been sent to a now deleted user. The deleted user being herself as another account. Vic also confirms this by revealing an identity card resembling Margot but bearing false information, immediately suggesting that she skipped town. This worries David. His refusal to accept this information leads to, well, a new lead when he stumbles upon, through sheer diligence, Margot's Ucast account, a video streaming service. Therein, he discovers videos of her being open about herself in ways he couldn't have expected. She definitely hasn't gotten over her loss of her mother, and his inability to see that has led her to be too emotionally distant from him.
Because apparently, he'd rather talk about the voice with his daughter over mourning about his dead wife on her birthday.
As he tells Vic about the Ucast discovery, she determines that any person Margot's interacted with on the site hasn't spotted her since her disappearance. Among her avid fans had been a user called Fish and Chips, a waitress from Pennsylvania whose alibi of having a shift that Friday night is asserted by Vic herself. Still unsatisfied with the current clues he has, he recognizes that in one of her Ucast streams and her Tumblr posts respectively, he recognizes a lake present in both images. The lake being Lake Barbosa. It's just a 5-minute drive from his place. Without hesitation, he gets in his car and repeatedly calls Vic while on his way to the lake. Every nook and cranny of the site is thoroughly searched, but no signs of Margot are found, besides her car being retrieved from the waters, alongside the $2,500 in cash she withdrew. The news picks up on this, and after several days of searching, she's all the talk within the Bay Area.
All the people that even remotely knew Margot before her disappearance suddenly used her tragedy as a way to garner attention for themselves at the expense of her father's dignity. All while they make outrageous claims about him while glorifying themselves in the process. The search goes on until a storm disrupts them, delaying her discovery.
Controversy after controversy, David is labeled a sex offender by mob justice without any basis, further desecrating his image. In spite of endless slander from the crowd, he manages to ruin his PR even more when he beats up the guy who stalked Margot's Instagram comments after growing suspicious of him, thus forcing Vic's hand to take him off the case. In a pit of despair, while using Margot's laptop, David takes a glance at the photos of the crime scene. He notices a hoodie that belongs to a hockey team Peter is a big fan of, the hoodie being his to begin with. Checking out her iMessage history with him afterwards, he is horrified by their discreet conversations suggesting that he's having sex with her. In a rush to beat him up as well, he visits his brother and sets him up with 3 cameras to obtain proof. While confronting him and demanding answers as to why Margot frequently visited him, Peter tries to explain himself by stating that she went to him not to ask for sexual favors, but to smoke marijuana with him instead as a way to cope with her ongoing depression regarding Pam's passing. Though David is somewhat relieved, a phone call ruins his slight moment of respite once he receives news that Margot has been declared dead by Vic's investigation. The confirmation of her death is announced by a press conference attended personally by Vic to address that an actual sex offender going by Randy got to her when she drove herself to Lake Barbosa. The man had residues of himself at the scene, confirming his accountability for Margot's murder to the point that his guilt couldn't handle the pressure, enough that he made a recording confessing his crime before pulling the trigger on himself. This evidence is sufficient to finally close down the case for good. David mourns the loss of yet another loved one. But as he uploads Margot's pictures to a memorial website as part of her vigil, the website handling her service bears a familiar face. He recognizes the woman holding the flowers greeting him for having uploaded the photos to the site's cloud. She looks exactly like Fish and Chips' profile picture. Some things just don't add up. So it's up to David to pick up the puzzle pieces. Once he confirms that the person perceived to be Fish and Chips isn't a waitress, but a stock model, thus explaining the Ucast profile, and confirmed to have no idea who Margot is at all, he dials Namus to notify Vic about this, only to be met by a distinct receptionist who describes to him that Vic's assignment to the case had been voluntary, not appointed. Looking up images of Vic, he also discovers that she works as a rehab officer. Among some ex-convicts she's with in the foreground in one of her pictures is Randy, the guy who allegedly killed his daughter, the guy who's killed no one but himself. Yet his blood lies on the detective's hands. Heading over to his daughter's supposed vigil, he has Vic arrested at the vigil that she has the nerve to attend for the crime she's committed, the crime being her son, Robert. Robert is a child of special needs, and Vic is well aware of it. His behavior is very uncommon, where at one point he used his mother's position to extort money from people only for her to cover up his tracks instead of punishment. Margot's disappearance is just like one of those. He posed as Fish and Chips in order to be able to converse with her on UCast without giving away that he'd been in love with her since they were kids. But his immense love for Margot may have been the reason he killed her. As he attempted to relate to her by pretending to be a waitress whose mother was dying of cancer, Robert never expected her sympathy to go beyond what he'd thought.
The $2,500 she stashed in her car, that was for his sick mother's cancer treatment. He denied her generosity because it was for a cause that never even existed, and he felt guilty enough to want to return it. But Margot was relentless. However, so was he. When she went to the lake to smoke the weed her uncle gave her, Robert followed her, without her knowing.
Inside her car, as a timid Robert approached Margot, she was startled enough to startle him too, forcing her to call for help that couldn't be heard, scaring her aggressor to unintentionally push her deep into a ravine. Horrified by what he had done, Mommy has to come save her little boy by conjuring the tale that is the case she'll be responsible for. From the fake ID, the handling of the UCAS controversy, to the Randy cover-up and her attempt of burying it, or rather drowning it, all of this was done to clear her son of his outrageous actions like she's always done before. This time, however, their plan failed. Vic takes full responsibility in place of her son, while David drives beside a search party towards a remote location where Margot, or possibly her remains, is possibly located after Vicky stated in her interrogation that the same storm that delayed the search weeks prior might have saved her just enough water to survive, prompting David to take his chances. At a ravine, the broadcast of a young girl whose body is either being retrieved or rescued is shown for all of California and more to see. Once raised up, she is barely alive, but alive nonetheless. And David can't help but be torn up from joy after finally having found her, father and daughter reunited. It is 2019, a couple years after the incident, and Margot retook her piano lessons to major in it. While her college application to major in her passion pens, David can't help but be proud with how far she's come. Pam would be proud too.
If only he would have said that before, then she wouldn't have been lost. But since he stayed quiet, he instead found her broken. She tried finding herself, but he was the one who searched. A father does what he does because it's what he ought to do. Although actions speak louder than words, one message can make all the difference. This film presents itself in a rather unique way, most notably in its visuals, where it exclusively illustrates the story through the eyes of one character accessing the web. It emphasizes how our lives can, will, and have been, for better or worse, glued to a screen. To speak without speaking, to hear without hearing, and to feel without feeling, people do exist beyond the screen. But those screens make human relationships superficial in the process. Texts tend to oversimplify conversations, and emojis underestimate emotions. The movie shows its excellence by how it portrays our human relationships through contemporary ends. Those of us living in modernity will certainly be able to relate to it. It's a demonstration, a warning, a tale, and a masterpiece of modern storytelling. Please subscribe to our channel to be notified when we upload. And don't forget to suggest movies that you want us to recap in the comments down below.